Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Gotham Baseball Live. I'm Mark Healey. I am one of the hosts of this great podcast, and my other co-host is Peter Schwartz. Good morning, Peter. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, Mark. Excited for the show today, and
Yes.
obviously, it's always great to talk to someone who has won a championship in New York, and with the Knicks on the brink of an NBA championship, it's always nice to remember those from any sport who have won a championship, and we've got one of those guys on the show today.
I've had the opportunity to meet Roger over the years. I'm sure he doesn't remember me, and that's fine. But I certainly remember him. Absolute. I got to meet him once. If we get to it, I want to mention the story to him. It's not a fun story because he got mad at me. But Roger McDowell, to me, growing up rooting for the 1986 Mets, was just an absolute joy to watch pitch. And that team obviously is just obviously, sadly, the last Mets team to win a championship. But it was such a great team, and Roger was such a great part of it. Really looking forward to talking with him. And kudos to you, Peter. I got to give Peter a lot of credit. You were able to get this down. I mean, we've been trying to get Roger on the show for a long time, but you were able to nail it down. Good job, buddy.
I appreciate it, and this took a little effort. And the reason why we have him on is because he's got this great new book out called Hot Foot, My Hijinks and Upside-Down Life with the 1986 World Champion New York Mets. And there's some great stories in this book. We'll get into some of them when he joins us in a few minutes. One of the things that I'm interested in talking to him about, whether you ask him or I ask him, obviously Hot Foot, the name of the book, but that was what he used to do to some of the teammates in the dugout. And I'm just wondering, and look, I remember following the 86 Mets. I was away in college when they were winning the World Series. But obviously, if you're from New York, you know a lot of the stories about what happened. And I'm just curious, and I want to hear it from him. What was his, teammates' reaction to his hijinks? Obviously, everyone got used to it, and they wound up winning a championship together. But I'm just wondering, like, here's this guy who's just, he's a reliever in the bullpen. He was a big part of that team. But I'm just wondering from his perspective how his teammates and how the whole organization reacted to what he was doing. And look, at the end of the day, it didn't hurt. They won a championship together. They probably should have won more than the one. But I'm just wondering what some of the reaction from his teammates were to that.
Well, obviously baseball was very different in 1986. You had two closers on the team, McDowell and Jesse Orosco. And, Roger's partner in crime was Hojo, Howard Johnson, another guy I've gotten the opportunity to meet with, absolutely fun guy. It's funny. To me, I'm going to predict that there were probably one or two guys that had absolutely no sense of humor about it. But I would think that the majority of the people in that organization, at least the players, probably had fun with it. I don't know about the coaches. We'll find out. We'll find out when we talk to Roger about that. But look, it was a fun team to root for. Jeff Pearlman's book, The Bad Guys Won. I never thought of the 1986 Mets as bad guys, and I
Well,
was in college
the
as
rest
well.
of Major League Baseball fans that were, if you weren't
Right.
a Mets fan, you looked at it that way.
Sure. And that's fine. Good. I love it when people hate the teams that I root for.
Yeah.
Bring it on. The key is to win.
Right.
That's the key. Like that's the difference maker. When Wemby is saying I got in your head and then you blow a 30-point lead, you know, then nobody likes you, and then everybody doesn't like you because you
Right.
talk nonsense and then you lost. So,
Yeah. Well, let me
the
tell you
thing
something
about
about Wemby really quick, not to get off topic, but if there's a player who does something that annoys my mother, who's not the biggest sports fan in the world, and she's calling me during these finals games saying, like, I don't like that number one, that big tall glass of water. I just don't like him. He's a nasty guy.
I'm not a fan. I get a lot of LeBron, and I'm not a LeBron James guy. I get a lot of LeBron not good vibes from him.
Uh-huh.
He says a lot of the wrong things when he's talking. Well, they asked him, do you want to win? Who do you want to win for? What do you win? And he's like, well, I want to win for me, which is
Yeah.
fine. but it's not, kind of like LeBron,
Yeah.
saying it. So I don't know, I mean, look, that's hopefully by the next time we see each other, the Knicks are world champions. I'm not touching the money. I said hopefully. And but
But I
you
think
know who
I
didn't
think the '86 Mets were the complete antithesis. Now, listen, not
exactly
everybody in that clubhouse liked each other. I don't think,
right,
excuse me, I don't think for a team to be successful, everybody, all 25 players, I don't think you have to like everybody, but I think you have
true,
to respect everybody in that room. And I think when it comes to the '86 Mets, there were clearly personality conflicts in
right,
that clubhouse. But you know what? At the end of the day, they all each pulled the rope, whatever they had to do, especially when the chips were down. Game 6 against the Astros in the
right,
NLCS, obviously Game 6 against the Red Sox in the World Series. So
sure,
you don't have to like everybody. Listen, there's probably people in your family that you don't like, but you still have to respect it when you're around them. So, but that's what I think.
absolutely.
When I think of the '86 Mets, that's what I think of.
Well, without further ado, he is ready to go, and here he is, Roger McDowell. He is the author of the new book, Hot Foot: My Hijinks and Upside-Down Life with the World Champion New York Mets. Just wait for him to get on, turn his camera on. Roger, welcome to Gotham Baseball Live. I'm Mark Healey, and that's Peter Schwartz. How are you today?
Mark, Peter, nice to be with you. Great, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Roger. So obviously, it's a special year for the Mets, the organization, and their fans with the 40th anniversary of that iconic World Championship. So there's been so many different stories written about that team and that year. What was it that gave you the inspiration to write this book, given that this is the anniversary, the 40th anniversary of that year?
You know what? It really wasn't inspiration. It was just that coming up on the 40th anniversary of the '86 championship. And I had gotten to know this author, the co-author, Doug Feldman. He did a few books on the Cardinals. And I talked with him probably 6 months prior to this project getting started. And he was easy to talk to. And the books that he had written about the Cardinals, he wanted a Met perspective of the rivalry that we had in the mid '80s to late '80s. But it's just an easy person to talk to. You could tell he loved baseball. You could tell he had a passion for the game. He respected the history of the game, and I just thought it was a good time to do something. Obviously, there's some overlap in the stories, and hopefully there's maybe a little new insight into some stories that have been previously told in numerous books by some of my teammates. But it was a great project. I enjoyed it, and just something that I felt like now's a good time.
Roger, I grew up with the Mets. So I was a freshman in so '86. I'm a senior in high school and I'm a
A
freshman in
freshman
college.
where? In college, okay.
So so when you came up and you were a homegrown guy and you were a guy that immediately I took to, because you just were so. I remember when in the '86 Mets video, Keith Hernandez, described you as like, a guy from Dartmouth, that you looked like that, you looked like this clean cut guy and it just funny, like all the different things that you would get into.
Yeah,
And, to me, the fact that you were a homegrown guy, I always rooted for those guys a little bit more.
right.
What was that clubhouse like for you? A veteran laden clubhouse. What was that
Sure.
clubhouse like for you?
Well, see, that's the understanding part of it, and I hope I portrayed it in the book a little bit. But '85 was my first year in the big leagues, and I made the big league club because of an injury. Davey Johnson had already set his staff of 10 going into the '85 season, and just an injury, a freak injury, or arm issue with Brent Gaff allowed me to make that ball club. And there was a pick of 4 guys that were going to go to AAA to start in Tidewater that Davey had to choose from. And I was fortunate that I got that call. And, fast forward, not going to AAA ever in my career. I jumped from AA with an arm injury, arm surgery. I had bone chips taken out in '84, but I never really went to AAA. And so moving on to '86, I was still the kid, and I was still the kid that had to prove myself on a daily basis of, whether it was being available, coming in and doing my job, and those type of things where, I was scared to death to get sent down, even in '86, even though I'd gotten into the co-closer role late in '85 with Jesse, probably midsummer in '85 with Jesse being the co-closer and going to '86 as co-closers. But still, I didn't feel secure. And so when you talked about the veteran leadership in the clubhouse, I was that kid that went in, kept my ears open and my mouth shut. And, in '85, Rusty was there. '86, obviously, with the addition of Gary in '85 as well. But, you still had Keith, you still had Ray Knight, you still had Howard Johnson. And to a certain extent, you had George Foster at the beginning of the year,
right? And
also you had the holdovers from the teams that weren't very good in the early '80s with Mookie Wilson and Wally Backman. And so, I guess there was some comfort, and you talked about it a little bit about being homegrown. There was comfort being surrounded by Lenny Dykstra and Kevin Mitchell and the Mark Carrions and the John Christensens that came up in that period of time. And so it wasn't so much the guys we hung out with, but it was, knowing my place. And my place was, keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open, go out and do your job and do it hopefully on a continuous basis.
We're talking to former Mets pitcher Roger McDowell. He's got this great new book. I don't want my back screen to wipe it out there, but the name of the book is Hot Foot. And I wanted to go in that direction towards the name of the book because you were obviously known for your abilities on the mound, but you also believed in a very loose clubhouse, and you started the hot foot in the dugout, in the bullpen, wherever you wound up doing it. And I'm just wondering what the origin of that was, and how did your teammates and the organization react to not just the hot foot thing, but also some of the other hijinks that you did when you were with the Mets?
Okay, give me 2 seconds because the dog just ripped off the power cord.
That's why we do it live, folks. You can't beat live.
All right, I'm back. So the
go.
dog just ripped off the power cord, and I don't want to, in the middle of this this interview, I don't want to go blank. And
yeah,
so,
we're gonna go viral because of your dog.
There you go.
There you go. But the origin of the hot foot really came over with Howard Johnson with the Detroit Tigers, and I don't know if you will remember, but obviously you do. You're old enough. This week in baseball with Mel Allen.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's where I saw it. And so I started asking Howard Johnson, and it's just so happened to be with the Detroit Tigers. And I asked Howard Johnson, I said, Howard, do you know about this thing they call the hot foot and how it works? He says, yeah. So he showed me. And then, because I was a reliever and I had some idle time, I kind of, I don't want to say perfected it, but I started figuring out, the things that would be needed for a successful hot foot, and how you could get it to stay on the back of the foot, how the matches would ignite, and all the things that went into it. And so it was quite a big task to unfold.
I remember, Roger. I remember from A Year to Remember, the 1986 Mets video. You went through, that whole thing. You go through the whole, description. You and Howard, and you're like, well, you wrap it with the bubble gum. You put the cigarette in it. I mean, I remember it to this day. It's one of those things that you just don't forget. And for me, I always got a kick out of it. I always thought it was hilarious, but I was paranoid, and I was like, I wanted to do that when I played, but I was like, there's no way I would get away with it. You had a quality where you would get away with it, and I just want to expound on what Peter was saying. There had to be somebody that didn't find it humorous, right?
Not that I came across.
Really?
No, I mean, all the guys, and you know what? I think the reason is probably goes back to Davy Johnson. And Davy Johnson, basically sat me down one day and said, "Hey, listen, there's a time and a place. There is a
Right.
time and a place." And so I picked the time, and hopefully I picked the time and places that were conducive to having a good time, enjoying it, but also respecting the fact that we had a game to win that day,
Right.
and also picking the people that the Bill Robinsons of the world, the John Vukovic's of the world, Lenny, who I came up with. It was all in fun. It was all for to enjoy what I call the greatest office in the world. I loved going to the ballpark and I loved having fun. And I also every time something popped up in my head, I had Davey on my shoulder sitting there telling me there's a time and a place, young man, and don't ever forget it.
Uh, when I think of the '86 season, I mean, obviously there's so many moments, and this came into mind the other day when the Knicks won that game on the OG Anunoby tip in there at the end, and people started talking about all the great moments in New York sports history, and obviously a few of them came during that postseason, and we all remember what happened in Game 6 of the World Series against the Red Sox. But one of the things that's always stuck out to me about that postseason was Game 6 against the Astros, because if you guys don't win that game, you have to face Mike Scott in Game 7, and you didn't want to have anything to do with that. And that Game 6 at the Astrodome was probably, at least in my memory, one of the 5 best baseball games I've ever watched, either in person or on television. Tell me about that game from your perspective, what it was like to play in it, and what the relief was like afterward when the game was over.
Well, as you guys following the Mets, and at the time, there were teams that Davey managed the bullpen to where Jesse would be the closer. Jesse would be the one at the end of the game. Maybe I'd have the early 6th or 7th inning, and Jesse would have late, and vice versa. And the teams that I had difficulties with and struggled with were the teams that had the left-handed hitters, played on AstroTurf, had switch hitters, and could run. Because the AstroTurf gets, Mark Forte was getting ground balls, and so the AstroTurf was not really conducive to what I was trying to do. And so, that being said, going into the playoffs, the Astros weren't my team, so to speak. And if you don't remember, but I do very vividly, going into the USA Today used to be a publication that when they had the sports page and especially going to the playoffs, and they would break down each position, and they said one of the things was that year in 1986, I think I was 0-3 against the Astros, and my ERA was like a 13. Oh. And so, they weren't a ball club that, one, I pitched particularly well against, or two, I think those 0-3 were just because Jesse had already been used and they were extra innings.
Right.
I do remember Craig Reynolds hitting an extra inning home run at Shea Stadium off me, for us to get beat there. But yep. They really weren't my ball club. And so going into that, I didn't feel like I'd be pitching a lot. And so, you come around to Game 6, and again, Davey with his, data and computer analytics before there were computer and analytics. I think Davey was the first to have a computer actually in the big leagues as a manager. And so, Bob Knepper's going into the 9th inning with a 3-hitter, and it's not looking good. Obviously, Mike Scott is looming, and so Davey picks lefty on lefty matchup and leads Lenny off. Okay, go figure that. And Lenny leads off and he hits a triple in the gap in right center field, and it kind of got us going a little bit. We get into their bullpen and tie it up, as we all know, and then I get the call to go in the game. And so my thought process was, okay, as a reliever, I think all relievers have to have this thought process: is yesterday is gone. You know, what is today? And so today was I was called on to pitch, and the bottom of the ninth inning there at the Astrodome with the tie game, and fortunately I get 2 or 3 innings in, and some good plays made. I was fortunate; balls hit at guys. The hard hit balls were hit at guys. I don't know. Luck was on my side that day. But after 2 or 3 innings, I think my turn in the batting order came up, and I'm looking. I'm like, okay, no, I'm ready to hit, but I don't know what Davey and Mel what they have in mind. And so Davey sends me up there to hit, and so I think there was 1 out when I hit. But it was looking back, it was obviously the most eventful appearance in my career. And I was very fortunate that I was able to pitch the 5 innings. I gave up the hit to Kevin Bass in my 5th inning, and Gary promptly threw him out at second base trying to steal. So there were a lot of things going my way that day, and I was very fortunate that I was able to do that.
Roger, to me, it's one of the most underrated performances of that playoff and of that season. You come in, you throw 5 scoreless innings. Davey always said that you always threw better when you threw a lot and your arm was tired.
Mm-hmm.
He always said that. I remember, so many interviews. And to me, when people talk about 86, and look, and rightfully so, they talk about El Cid coming in, in Game 7, shutting everybody down. People don't talk about that. Yet to me, I think that was, just as big as any other moment in those playoffs. And even you kind of like, well, I threw some innings. I mean, that was just incredible. And, for every Met fan that lived through that, I'm supposed to be a professional now, but every Met fan that went through that, I mean, I watched every single inning of that game like it was like my life was on the line.
What's so cool is years later, the documentary or people talk about where they were and things like that. And, unbeknownst to us, we're in the bowels of the Astrodome, and people are debating whether to go home from work, or they're off work and they don't want to miss any part of the game. They want to watch it, and they're at the appliance store, watching it on TV, or they're, the limo is pulled up and all the doors are open and they're watching the game. All these people crowded around the limo, and it was, now looking back, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Absolutely.
At the time, it was like my career. My career when I was young, I was trying to survive against a team that I had not pitched particularly well against, and knowing the fact that that if I succumb and I don't do my job, that we're going to have to play another game, and the prospects aren't that great because of who was looming on the pitcher's mound the next day.
Roger,
I always say, though, you know what? I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
I always say, when we get together and stuff, with the 86 Mets, and they say, about the Game 6, and you had to win it because Mike Scott and this and that, it's like, I was always, to this day, I believe, for whatever reason, we would have found a way. I think
agree.
we would have. We would have found a way. I mean, all the things that happened during that season, and even fast forward the World Series being down, your last out with 2 strikes on 3 different guys, and it's like, what? It's like, I think we would have found a way. Is that team had some way to rise when our backs were against the wall.
No
Sorry,
question about it.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please, no, don't worry about it. Earlier in the interview, you kind of alluded to when you were planning the book that you figured there would be some overlap with other stories. And to me, when someone writes a story about writes a book about something that maybe the fans of the team or just people who live in that area, they may know the whole story. A documentary comes out, you learn something new. Give us a story in the book that you tell that maybe the typical Met fan may not know of from that '86 season.
God, I don't. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one because everything's been so well documented, and I think back to the game in Cincinnati where Jesse and I played the outfield, and
awesome.
and Keith makes a play on a bunt by Carl Willis to start a double play, throws the ball to Gary Carter. I think that was Gary's first time ever playing third base in his entire life, and throws the ball over to Tuffer, and we completed a double play there. I think if anything, maybe the fact that Gary had never played third base in his career before, or the fact that Lenny stepped on my foot to catch the ball off the bat. I think it was either Eddie Milner or Max Venable lofted a fly ball to left center field, and at the time I was playing left field, and I was camped underneath it. And again, and you have to understand is that I think one of the reasons Davey and the coaching staff came up with the idea that Jesse and I could play the outfield is that's what we did during batting practice.
Right.
We did that the entire batting practice, and that was part of our conditioning. That was what we did to get our running in, to stay in shape. And so we were very adept at catching fly balls. Jesse got to catch one off the bat of Tony Perez when I was pitching. And I was like, how cool would that be to be able to, two pitchers play the outfield, both have putouts, and one gets a win and one gets a save. And so I just thought that would be pretty cool to be a part of. But Lenny had other ideas. He said, I said, because Lenny's nickname obviously was Dude. And I said, Dude, what are you doing? He goes, just wanted to be sure, man. Just wanted to be sure. So as long as we got the out. So
I watched that game in real time.
Yeah,
Raj, with my dad, and we were sitting in the garage on a black and white TV, and to this day I see it in color. I guess because I've seen so many video replays of that. I watched every single game, listened to every inning of that season. That's the way I am. And again, I'm supposed to be a professional, but reliving '86, and I'm sure it's obviously very different for you as a player. But as a fan, as somebody who watched every inning, I just get all giddy, and I feel like I'm 15 again. Watching.
But see that's the thing is you lived it. You lived it. I played it and lived it, but you lived it, and that's the thing about the New York fan. The passionate fan base, the folks that really put their heart and soul into a ball club. And
yes,
it was nice. Obviously we had so many different characters that I think there were so many people that the fan base could relate to. And it was like, pick a guy. They're not clones. They're all different guys. And, maybe you gravitate to a certain person because of that. And so, it's please don't demean the fact that you were a fan, because that was the bulk of what we really enjoyed. Going out 60,000 people on a Monday night playing Pittsburgh.
It's great.
Doc's pitching.
Okay.
Or Straw's coming up for 4 times. Nobody left. It didn't matter how many were down. If Straw was coming up in the 9th inning, people stuck around because they may see something they haven't seen before, or Doc pitching. It was an event. Actually, a friend of mine likened it to when the Beatles came into town. It was, and at the time the Yankees were down and the Mets owned the city, and so it was it was just not about our ball club, but it was about the entirety of the city and the folks that supported and believed in us and had the passionate feelings for the New York Mets.
Roger, last thing from me, Keith Hernandez writes the foreword in your book, and I bring that up only because this Sunday is June 14th. And for those who really pay close attention to television and the history of sitcoms, June 14th, I think it was 1987, Kramer and Newman on Seinfeld for years thought that Keith Hernandez spit on them after a game. As it turns out, you were the one who spit on them.
Allegedly.
So
Allegedly.
Allegedly. So all these years later, that iconic episode of Seinfeld, what was that like for you to be part of it, and the fact that people like myself still bring it up to this day?
Well, that was an episode in the second season, and so I mean, it really hadn't caught on or become iconic like it is today. So I think the first season had 6 or 8 episodes, and so we go to LA. You know, Keith calls me up. I'd been traded. I was in Philadelphia at the time, or with the Phillies. But he called me up over the winter. I think it was 90 or 91. Anyway, he calls me up and says, "Hey, I know Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld. He's a comedian. They have this show called Seinfeld, and do you want to be on it?" Okay, it's TV. Yeah, of course. It's with you, Keith. And so Keith flies from New York. I fly. I was living in South Florida at the time. And we meet up in LA and go to the studio, pick us up, or I don't know, we cab there or whatever. Pre-Uber. We go to the studio and get to meet everybody. And one of the things that Larry David comes up and nice to meet you and this and that. He goes, "So how do you like the show?" I had never seen it. Because it was only once, the first season, and obviously it was on Thursday nights. Well, I don't know about the first season, but it was on Thursday nights after that. Yeah. We had ball games. I mean, I don't watch. And even the years after that, I couldn't watch because only in the winter. And so I said I didn't tell Larry David I hadn't seen it. I said, "It's great. I love it." I mean, if I say I'd never seen it, I might be on the next plane back to South Florida. But it was fun, and you know what? I mean, I think there's only two-part episodes, and the other one is the finale. And I think Keith and I, and Keith being the bulk of the acting, we're on the 2-part series, the only 2-part series that's not the finale. But I was, when they were taking me out to the parking lot and they said, "Listen, you ever watch Laugh-In?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, remember that Artie Johnson and how he parts the bushes?" And and I said, "Yeah, I remember. I know." He goes, "Well, that's what we want you to do, but after you part the bushes, we want you to spit." So I said, "Okay." So we take 2 and take. Plane flies over, or a car goes by, or somebody coughs, or whatever. And so after about 15 takes, I said, "Listen," I said, "I'm running out of spit. I have no saliva left." And so he said, "Well, just act like you're spitting." I said, "Okay, I can do that." But it was a lot of fun, and obviously, when I come back to New York, it's number one is Hotfoot. Roger. Roger. Give me a hot foot. Don't give me a hot foot. Number 2, Seinfeld, and 3, I played for the Mets, and so which I am totally fine with because I forget who said it, but as long as you're remembered, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
The book is Hotfoot, Roger McDowell, former Met member of the 1986 World Championship team. Thank you so much. The book is out from Triumph Books, so make sure you can get it anywhere. I'm sure Amazon, all the usual places. Thank you so much for spending some time going down memory lane with us. And best of luck. Hopefully we'll see you at Citi Field sometime soon.
All right. Look forward to it, fellas. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
You too, Roger. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Roger.
All right. Adios.
So,
You got it.
That was great. I mean, I had, talk about a deep cut, Artie Johnson. I mean, from laughing, that's as deep a cut. I guarantee you there are going to be people watching to be like, who? Let me tell you something. I have no patience for people who say things are before their time. If you don't know who Artie Johnson is from Laughing, do a favor and educate yourself, because
there you go.
It was hilarious.
And
I never knew that. I never knew that. Did you ever know that?
No, I didn't. Not at all. That we found out a little something extra. I know we only have a couple of minutes left to go before we run out of time. I just want to make a statement about the '86 Mets. I told you I was away at college during the World Series, and it's well documented. I'm a Yankee fan, but I have to tell you right now, I rooted so hard for the Mets in the '86 World Series, because at the time, it's not like it is now where you have respect for your rivals, like the Yankees and the Red Sox have this newfound respect. I didn't want to see the Red Sox win the World Series. I rooted very hard for the Mets in '86. Maybe not a lot of Yankee fans felt the same way, but that team was so much fun to watch, and that run with all the unbelievable moments was just tremendous. And we can't thank Roger enough for coming on the show.
Oh, absolutely. We didn't get to half the stuff that, we wanted to talk about. But the thing is that when you get the opportunity to talk to somebody like Roger, you don't want to pass that by. So it was fantastic. Yeah. And I'm a big '86 Mets guy. And most of my friends that are Yankee fans, most of the family, they either didn't watch or or they rooted, they weren't going to root for the Red Sox. Yeah. But I tell you who really did root for the Mets in that '86 series, and he did it with biting his lip, was George Steinbrenner, because he absolutely loved the '86 Mets, as we found out later on when he signed a bunch of them. Always tried to hire Davey Johnson as a manager. It never worked out. Yeah. But, again, Peter, I can't thank you enough for making that happen. It's a great job out of you. And, that's one of the thrills that we get doing this. We get to talk to people that we really admire and get people that we watched as fans. And, it's one of those things where, you just can't beat it. So now we're going to have to get somebody from the 1996 Yankees.
We're going to work on that. By the way, thanks to Josh Williams, PR at Triumph Books for organizing that interview.
Again, that's Gotham Baseball Live for another week. Peter, thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure to do the podcast with you, and look forward to next week's show.
We'll see you next week.